Hi, everyone. My name is Donovan Kearns. I am one of the academic team coaches at Royal Spring Middle School in Georgetown, Kentucky. And this presentation is on how to host Governor's Cup using Zoom. It's hard to talk about hosting Governor's Cup using a video conferencing tool without giving some general tips on how to host in general. So you will see that interspersed throughout this presentation. So the biggest tip that I have during this presentation is to be organized. The more organized that you are as contest manager or as the host school, the more smoothly your competition is going to run. So whatever you can do to ensure that you and your officials, as well as the other coaches who may be helping you, are organized, the better that this competition will run. So some general Zoom settings to consider. You're going to want to set up your Zoom links to be password protected, and you want to set up your Zooms to have a waiting room. This will help you ensure that the only people who are entering those Zooms are the ones that you are expecting. You'll want to set up your Zooms to record on the cloud. This allows you to access that Zoom recording on any computer that you log into your Zoom account on. If you only have it record to the local computer, then that is the only computer that will have the recording unless you save it to some type of external hard drive or a flash drive. And so it would make it harder to access if you needed it. You should turn off the bell every time a person enters the room. That's one of the Zoom settings, but sometimes if you're in a Zoom meeting, if somebody new enters, you'll hear a ding dong in the background. That can get really confusing with the buzzing of the quick recall system. So if you are able to turn that off, that's going to be really good. You want to make sure that your proctors and officials are co-hosts of their respective Zoom rooms. And we're going to talk about what kind of proctors and officials you're going to need later on in this presentation. One person cannot have more than one link that they created active at once. So if you are being super organized, like I was when I was hosting for 6th grade showcase, and you create all the Zoom links, it's not going to work well. Zoom only allows you to have one of those links that you created open at one time. What it does is when you try to open the second link, it kicks everybody out of the first one, even if you have made other people co-host or host before you open the second one. You should rely on coaches from your district or other people who are helping you from your school to help create the other Zoom links that you're going to need. So I wanted to talk about what the contest manager responsibilities are. We're going to be going through a lot of these responsibilities in this presentation, and we're going to work in the order of the events of how they will happen the week of the actual competition. So you want to make sure that you're securing working emails from all coaches and officials. You as contest manager will want to reach out to all of those coaches and officials prior to the event and make sure that the email address that you have is the best one for them, because you're going to be sending lots of really important information to those coaches and officials through those email addresses. You will coordinate video conferences. We're assuming Zoom, since you're in the hosting session on Zoom, for the following events. The coaches planning meeting, which takes place typically the Thursday before the week of competition. The FPS and composition proctors orientation, where you will tell the proctors what they're expected to do during the event. The FPS and composition events, which will be attended by students and proctors. The written assessment proctor orientation, which is again where you tell the proctors what they will be expected to do. The quick recall official orientation, again, you're telling the officials what you want them to do. The actual written assessment events with students and proctors. The quick recall question preview, which is led by your chief official. That is where they will actually open up the quick recall questions, read through them, and make sure they will address any pronunciation issues that they may have or any questions that they may come up with as they are reading through the different question sets. You'll need Zooms for each quick recall match. that students, coaches, and officials will attend. And then there is the optional award ceremony that would happen after all of the events. And if you choose to conduct that award ceremony, you can have a Zoom, which you conduct that ceremony through. Based on input from coaches at the planning meeting, the contest manager assigns those officials to their various roles and confirms their participation. Typically, the coaches will tell you what roles their officials that they are providing like to do. So they may tell you, hey, this person likes to be a judge, or this person's a really good moderator. That will help you begin to start putting people in their places for the events. As the contest manager, you're going to conduct the orientation sessions for the officials. You may choose, some people have the chief official conduct the orientation session for quick recall for anybody who does not actually have to see the question. Sometimes the chief official will have that session, or the contest manager can do that. The contest manager performs the quick recall draw and coordinates the progression of the bracket as each round finishes. And then the contest manager will enter FPS, composition, and quick recall results into KAC's online scoring system. Written assessment scores are input directly from KAC's testing platform and need only to be confirmed and submitted, which is really awesome. Having to score the written assessments used to take a lot of time and a lot of manpower, but now with this online testing system, that system does it for you. So whoever you have as your contest manager or your head scorer, if you have somebody who is assuming that role, they just have to confirm that all these scores are in there and that the system is putting them in the correct order before they submit those scores. So at the coaches meeting, like I said, that is typically the Thursday before the week of events. You will set up your coaches meeting using the same Zoom settings you will use for the Governor's Cup links. The same Zoom settings will help you anticipate any issues that may come up during the actual competitions. You want to make sure the coaches use the computer they'll be using on competition days. Again, this helps make sure there are no issues. If there are any issues, they can be resolved before the actual competition. You want to have the coaches use a video to see if it causes any audio issues for them. What we noticed during our 6th grade showcase hosting is that using Zoom and having the video on can cause a lag for audio and can make it difficult for users, especially those who are on Chromebooks, to respond back to you and for you to be able to understand it. So you want your coaches to use their video to see if they're having any issues so that they can anticipate what their students might encounter. If a coach is going to be having their students come to school to do the competition, if they're allowed to do that with their school policy, then for the coaches meeting, they're going to want to be at school to simulate what's going to actually happen on the competition day. You will tell coaches how you will communicate the Zoom links to them. Encourage coaches to have students download the Zoom client early. If you are in a district or region where not everyone uses Zoom on a regular basis for school, the first time they access Zoom, they may have to download a Zoom client. If you tell them this prior to the event, they can already have that accomplished, and it allows the event to continue on as scheduled. If you have to wait for everyone to download that Zoom client, it causes the competition to lag a little bit as you're having to wait for those students or coaches or officials to download that client. It's also harder to troubleshoot the day of the event when you could have troubleshot, I don't know what the exact term is, but you could have completed that prior to the event, and you would have had days to try to figure out what was going on. I'm going to move my video real quick. I used a Google Sheet that I shared immediately after the coaches meeting to communicate basic information as well as Zoom links. I have a link to an example Google Sheet that is included within this presentation that you can use to help yourself be organized if you would like. Again, remembering that being organized is probably the most important and most beneficial thing that you can do to help the running of your competition. Tip number 2 is that communication between coaches and officials is key. You have to have good communication in order for your competition to run smoothly. Whether that communication is through email or, depending on the situation, is through texting or through calling on a cell phone, making sure that that communication is happening is critical because it allows for everyone to be on the same page and allows for issues to be resolved very quickly. So the first events that you will have for your Governor's Cup will be feature problem solving and composition. And you'll want to assign ID codes for students in those competitions. As soon as all of the teams have their competitors' names into ASAP, KAC's online scoring system, go ahead and create ID codes for FPS and composition. Do not wait to create those ID codes the day of the competition. That needs to be done as soon as possible. Once you have created those ID codes, then you are able to create and label the documents, whether Google Doc or Microsoft Word, that they will use for competition. Brenda from KAC will provide example composition and FPS booklets. You, as contest manager, need to share practice copies of those a couple of days in advance using the exact same method as you will for competition. If you are using Google Docs, make sure these documents are converted from the Microsoft Word they will probably be given to you in and are ready for a practice. You need to make sure that you are sharing practice copies of what the students will see so they will know what to expect on the competition day, so they know how they're going to be able to edit those documents, so they know where those documents are going to show up. So if you're sharing with them on Google, making sure they realize that they get an email that comes from you with the shared document. Or if you're sharing it with Microsoft Word, making sure they realize they have to download that document from their email in order to have a version that they can edit. You need to ask for verification from the competitors that they can access these documents and can edit them. And I would give them a deadline by which they should respond back to you that they are able to see those documents. If you have not heard from the competitors by whatever deadline you assign, so for example, we had the coaches meeting on Thursday. We sent the practice documents on Friday. I gave the students till Sunday to email me back or to put in our Google Docs, because that was the version that we used, that they were able to access those documents. If I didn't hear from those students by Sunday, I immediately reached out to their coaches and said, hey, I didn't hear from so-and-so. Are you able to ask them if they can access the documents? We just needed to know that they were able to get to these documents and that all emails were going through, so that way the competition would run smoothly. Sometimes, particularly if a school is not on the traditional web domain that a majority of Kentucky schools are on, emails do not go through to them. So you need to know that the emails are going through. Or if they do go through, sometimes it may go into that student's spam folder. So making sure they know they have to look in the spam to find the practice document, because that's going to be the exact same thing that will happen when they get the real document on the competition day. For composition and FPS, you'll need one Zoom link for composition. The gallery view on Zoom can show around 25 people. So for any of your districts, you're not going to have that many students to where you're not going to be able to see them all at once. So that would work for one Zoom link. If you are hosting region, and there are 4 districts in your region and each one has 5 students, that's 20 students plus whatever number of officials you have. You may want to think about having 2 Zoom links, but it's up to you. You will want one Zoom link per FPS team to ensure that the session is recorded. I suggest, like I said earlier, using cloud recording versus recording on the local computer. Recording on the cloud allows the owner of the recording to access it on any computer rather than just the computer the meeting was used on. Zoom does not automatically record breakout rooms on the cloud, so I would be hesitant to use one Zoom link for all FPS teams. As a reminder, for future problem solving, the students are having to confer between their teams. So you don't want multiple teams to be in the same Zoom because it would be incredibly difficult for them to confer without the other teams being able to hear everything they're saying. So that's why I suggest having each team have their own Zoom. You could use breakout rooms, but it is very difficult to get the breakout rooms to record because typically it only records the room that the host is in. So it would be very difficult to get all the rooms recorded, and then you wouldn't be able to know what happened if you had anything you needed to check, or if somebody said something happened to their technology and they got kicked out of the room, you would have no way of really verifying when that happened based on the recording if you weren't recording that breakout room. So again, you need one Zoom link for composition and one Zoom link per FPS team to ensure that the session's being recorded. You'll communicate with composition and FPS proctors several days before the event. I communicated with all of my officials the Saturday before the event. If you are assigning a lead proctor, make sure that person knows and is comfortable with that responsibility prior to the event. When I'm talking about a lead proctor, that is the person who is going to read the proctoring prompts that is provided by KAC. They're also the ones who are going to fill out what time the competition started, as well as what time it ended, and send that information back to KAC. You will send the Zoom link to all proctors and coaches several days before the event. You don't forget, you need to make sure that you are scheduling a time to talk with the proctors prior to the event. It can be on the same day, and if it is, then that link that you use for the proctors can be doubled as one of the links that you need for competition. But you will want to tell the proctors what your expectation of them is. And essentially, the proctors are watching the time, making sure that competitors know how much time they have remaining based on the proctor guidelines, as well as they're watching the videos of the competitors to make sure they are not using any inappropriate resources. You'll want to open the Zoom link at least 20 minutes before the event should start. This gives you plenty of time to get these students into the Zoom. It also gives you a chance to make sure all these student videos are on, and that they can ask any questions that they may have prior to the event. Contest managers should send the official composition and FPS booklets to students the day of the competition. You're going to send them just a couple of minutes before the event is scheduled to start. Your contest manager, like I said, will be instructed to send it a couple minutes before the event should start. It's essential that proctors receive the documents as well so they can send to students if need be. So this again is if you have a school that is on a different email domain than yours, it's good to have a composition proctor who has that email. So that way, if they receive the prompt and the students don't receive it, they can try to send it from their email domain. Sometimes that works better. But it's just good for the proctors to receive that information so they can send it out to students if for some reason not every student receives it from the contest manager. Proctors will make sure that students can access all the documents prior to starting the official competition time. So the third tip that we kind of have for the competition is that putting off tasks until Saturday is a death sentence for the competition. So any task that can be completed prior to Saturday needs to be completed. because it is going to be a very busy day organizing written assessment and making sure that quick recall is running and that everyone is where they need to be. There's a lot of work that goes into that. So anything that can already be completed for FPS and written composition prior to Saturday is good. And anything that you need to do, particularly for written assessment before Saturday, is good as well. So just like written composition and FPS, you assign ID codes for written assessment. Once students are assigned tests by their coaches in ASAP, ASAP will automatically assign ID codes and passwords. This is different than if you competed in JV Challenge or 6th grade Showcase this year, where the contest manager assigned the codes and then they had to give out the passwords. Now ASAP will do that all on its own. Coaches are able to make changes to their student roster and to the test that those students are taking until the coach's planning meeting. After that meeting, all changes have to go through the contest manager. Coaches will have direct access through ASAP to get their student passwords. So they get a link to input their students. Once the coaches meeting is over and they know that that is their roster, they can go back to that link and get the student passwords that they will then give to their students in order for them to take the test. You as contest manager need to make sure to tell your coaches it is their responsibility to get passwords, video conferencing links, and other necessary information to their students. It is not your job to get the information to the students. You get the information to the coaches, and the coaches get the information to the students. So, like I was talking about earlier, while gallery view on Zoom can show 25 people at once, I would suggest having Zoom rooms of less than 15 people total, competitors and proctors. I suggest this because it allows the videos to be big enough so you can really see what these students are doing within those videos, as well as it keeps down the possible number of questions that you will receive. While this is probably the first time many of these students are using the online testing system, they're going to have questions about what they're supposed to be seeing, where they're going to put in their password, what's going to happen once they start the test. They're going to have questions. So you want to manage how many people are in that room, because in turn it keeps down the possible number of questions that you may have. You will need to probably create at least one Zoom room for one testers. Those are students who are only taking one written assessment test, and one Zoom room for 2 testers or 3 testers. So those are students who are taking 2 or 3 written assessment tests. 3 testers are rare. Typically, the most you will have is 2 tests because those students are also doing quick recall. But if you have a team that's not doing quick recall, then you may have 3 testers. If needed, you can break up the 1 testers to where subjects are grouped together. So you can have all the math students in one room that are only taking 1 test, and all the science in one room that's only taking 1 test, and so on and so forth. For 2 or 3 testers, you want to make sure that the math students are placed together. Also for 2 and 3 testers, I would try to have as many students taking the same test first in the Zoom. So with the traditional Governor's Cup setting, students would be getting an ID card, and on that ID card, the subjects are listed on the top from left to right, and students were expected to take their test in order from left to right. So if they were like math and language arts, math came first on the ID card, so they took math first. If it were me, I would have students follow a similar scheme when they're taking these online tests. If you have as many students taking the same subject at once, it helps your head scorer verify scores more quickly. So for instance, if all students, whether they are one test or two or three tests, are all taking math at once, no matter what, after that first round, all the math scores should be done. This allows your head scorer to go ahead and make sure that they received a score or a test response from all the students who are taking math. And it also allows them to go ahead and verify those scores, knowing that they might have to change them based on an inquiry, but if there are no inquiries, then that subject's already done. And so then after two testers, you'd only be looking at the other four tests because they would all possibly have somebody still finishing them, but at least the math at that point would be complete. You'll want to communicate with written assessment proctors several days before the event. If you are assigning a lead proctor, remember that's the person who reads the prompts on the proctor guidelines and announces to the students how much time they have left. You want to make sure that that person knows and is comfortable with that responsibility prior to the event. You also want to make sure you let the proctors know how many tests they're going to be proctoring. So you want to make sure that that person knows if they're in a one test room or in a two test room, because that changes the amount of responsibility that those proctors have. You will send the Zoom links to all proctors and coaches several days before the events. Again, you'll need to schedule a time to talk with the proctors prior to the event. If on the same day, that Zoom link that you use to talk to the proctors could become a tech help room with the contest manager, where you could send students who are having issues of technology to the contest manager to help get that figured out so it doesn't slow down the actual running of the testing room with the other students. Again, this is just a suggestion based on how many people you have volunteering to help with the running of the competition. Again, you want to open the Zoom links at least 20 minutes before the event should start. This will give your proctors time to check the calculators for the math students before the competition time begins. This is another reason why it's a good idea to have the math students all grouped together, because that means that it reduces how many proctors have to be checking calculators. If you have them all in different rooms, then every proctor is going to have to ask for calculator checks. But if you have them all in one room, or in two, if you have like all the one testers in one and all of the two or three testers in one, then it reduces how many people are having to ask to look at those calculators. And the calculator check guidelines will be provided to the proctors. For quick recall, you'll need a Zoom link for the amount of matches that can happen at once. So for example, if during round one there are 2 matches, then you will need 2 Zoom links. And you're going to look at all your rounds and see what is the biggest round with the most amount of matches happening at once. That's the amount of Zoom links you need to create for the whole day. You can double those Zoom links for different rounds. So you can keep 2 Zoom links for the whole day, and the teams just change which Zoom they're in based on what part of the bracket they're in. I would have the host of the Zoom links be people who can stay on that specific Zoom for the whole afternoon. So in our 6th grade showcase section, we had our contest manager be the host of one of the Zooms, and our head scorer was the host of the other Zoom. They were able to be on those Zooms all day. They were able to assign the breakout rooms, which we're going to talk about here in a second. They were able to check and see who was coming and leaving the room. And it helped provide some stability. We had our main officials here at our school. So if something was happening, we were all in close proximity within our own rooms here in the school to help address questions. For timeouts and halftime, you will need to use the breakout rooms if the coaches request it. I would make sure that your Zoom host knows how to create breakout rooms. So for instance, We did not use breakout rooms for timeouts. We basically used timeouts as a means for substitution, but we did use breakout rooms during halftime, and that was a time when coaches were able to talk strategy with their students. In some of the other sessions that I have led, people asked if we used breakout rooms for bonuses. No, we did not use breakout rooms for bonuses because going to the breakout room and having the 10 seconds to talk and then coming back would add a lot of time for each one of those bonus questions. It's not very efficient to do that. So we had these students just confer openly within the actual Zoom link, the 4 students that were on the team. We had them just unmute and talk during their 10 seconds instead of having them go in a breakout room. I would also make the coaches co-host of the Zooms while they are competing. This will help them be able to let students back in the room if they are having questions. It also helps them if a student is having technological issues, they can chat with the co-host and they can let their coach know that. Like I said earlier, use the same Zoom links throughout Quick Recall. There's no reason to have new Zoom links at every round. Just keep the same 2 or 3, depending on how many matches you have going on at once, and the teams just change based on where they are in the draw. Have an easy way to let coaches know the Zoom links and to give those Zoom links to their students. We used an electronic version of the Quick Recall draw and had our Zoom links as well as match codes for Quiz Bowl Pro on there. You'll send out the first round Zoom links to coaches and officials a few days in advance. This also gives you a chance to temporarily place officials in a room and kind of show them what you're going to have them do within the first round. This gives those officials a chance to say, hey, I'm not really comfortable moderating, or hey, I'd really like to moderate, and gives you an idea prior to coming in for the orientation and the question preview. I would suggest having coaches do practice Quick Recall sessions prior to the event and see how the students' devices act with videos on or off. We found that during our competition, Chromebooks had a really difficult time running Zoom, Quiz Bowl Pro, and having their videos on. So we had to have our students have their videos off during Quick Recall in order for them to actually be able to answer and for us to understand what they were saying. Typically, the audio would get kind of garbled, and you would only catch part of words if their video was on. So if you have the coaches do practice sessions with their students prior to the event, then they will already know what is happening with their students' devices, and they'll be able to let you know as contest manager so you all can make a consensus amongst the teams as to how the competition needs to run. It is vital that you conduct a Quick Recall dress rehearsal. KAC has questions available for you to use. It is also better if you conduct this Quick Recall dress rehearsal prior to the Saturday of Governor's Cup. So there needs to be no student or no team that enters Governor's Cup never having used the Quiz Bowl Pro system or the video conferencing system that you're using for the competition before the actual competition date. If there are teams or students who aren't used to the system, it automatically kind of gives them a disadvantage, but it also slows down the running of the competition. Governor's Cup Saturday can be a long day depending on how many teams are in the draw and how successful your team is being. So you don't want the Quick Recall matches to take longer than what is necessary and what is appropriate. So conducting these Quick Recall dress rehearsals will help make sure that those matches run smoothly. The online Quick Recall manual contains some Quiz Bowl Pro technical considerations on page 34 and some coaches' do's and don'ts on pages 35 and 36. That is linked right here. You can also find that on the KAAC website. One tip that we found through our 6th grade showcase was that you should create Quiz Bowl Pro extra accounts so that you do not have to give out your coach account information for Quiz Bowl Pro. Giving out your own coach account information means that whoever is running the quick recall matches has a chance of actually changing your settings or possibly deleting some students, unintentionally, of course, but it just means that they have a chance to mess up your actual account, where if you're having them use one of these extra accounts, it would be much easier to fix. And it also reduces people knowing your username and password to the system. So you will go to this website. Using that above website, you can create extra accounts. You'll use a fake email address. So for example, my school is Royal Spring Middle, so it could be rsms1@practice.com. It just needs to make sure it has the @website.com or the, whatever ending in it that is an actual website ending, that .com or .org, or if you're using like the kyschools.us, something like that, that the system will recognize as a website. You'll want to make sure you write down the account information that you create. You won't be able to retrieve the password if you lose it because it sends an email with the password, and since it's a fake email, you'll never get it. So you just have to make another account. You don't want to duplicate your same email address for your real account, or it defaults and changes the login information and your information to this new account. But we found this really helpful to use. We were able to give these accounts to the people who were running our buzzer systems, and they were able to just maintain those systems all day. They could create the matches. They could make sure all the teams that were needed for the competition were already in there, and it just helped it run really smoothly. So for quick recall gameplay, whoever is running the Quiz Bowl Pro will need to share their screen. You'll have the Zoom set to where participants can only chat with co-host and not each other. This allows students to chat with host if they are having tech problems, such as their coaches, but does not allow them to communicate with each other throughout the match. You should have students rename on Zoom with their school name first to make it easier for students to be recognized when they buzz in. That also makes it easier for whoever is the host of the Zoom to place the correct people into their breakout rooms for halftime or for timeouts. And then you can have captains put a C at the end of their school name to designate that they are the captain. Some teams also make sure that the person who's running the Quiz Bowl Pro puts the captain in the first slot. That way, everybody knows that that first slot is designated captain. It is really difficult to change names of people once they are already in the system and there is a match running with them in it. So that's why it's easier to change the Zoom name or to have a designated location where that captain's name is going to be put. For quick recall inquiries, make sure you've discussed with coaches and officials how quick recall inquiries will work. You'll make sure you have sent the coaches and officials an electronic version of the inquiry form prior to the first round of competition. KAC will also have this on their website under the resources page for the competition as well. So for example, during our 6th grade showcase section, our inquiry procedure was to have inquiries emailed to the judge of that particular round, who would make a decision, pull the coaches into a breakout room to discuss, offer the option for the other coach to have a rebuttal, and then they would email to the chief official if either coach stated they wanted that to be sent on. So this still allows for the inquiries to happen. It also keeps it to where if you pull those coaches into a breakout room, It limits who is involved in the hearing of that discussion, and it keeps it just with the coaches who are the ones who really need to be in there with the judge. As a reminder, all of the typical inquiry procedures and regulations would still need to happen. So you wouldn't want to reveal team names in the inquiry. The person who is judging when they send it to the chief official will not tell the chief official who each team is that's in the match, because you want to make sure that the chief official can still be impartial. So I have an example hosting spreadsheet. You'll want to make a copy for yourself, and you can delete the quick recall brackets that do not represent your district on your copy of the spreadsheet. KAC has already placed a version of this spreadsheet on their website. I will click on this to show you what it looks like. So this spreadsheet is broken down into different tabs. So this first tab is the written composition tab. You'll put the date, the time that you as coaches decided, and the Zoom link. For written composition officials, you will put who the host is. So typically, that is probably going to be you if you are attending this training. So your name, your school, your email, the chief official, the contest manager, and the head scorer if that person is not one of the others. You'll put down any of the names of the composition proctors, their schools that they are affiliated with in their email, and then the same for your composition readers. This helps keep all of the important information for the main people for written composition all here in one area. For future problem solving, it's going to look similar. You'll put the date, the time of the competition, and the Zoom link or Zoom links if you have multiple teams who are competing in FPS. So you could retitle this Zoom link for A middle school, Zoom link for B middle school, Zoom link for C middle school, depending on how many teams you have competing. For FPS officials, again, these top 4 should be the same: host, chief official, contest manager, and head scorer. You will have the FPS proctors. So you do need a person who is watching the students complete the future problem solving booklet, just like you would for written composition. And then each team should provide a grader, and all that information could be here. You could also add in the day and time that the graders are going to be grading to help you know when you are supposed to send the booklets and the score sheets to them. You could do the same thing for written composition as well. For written assessment, this first section here is for the first time slot. So you'd put the date and the time. KAC provides the time in their hosting manual. So I have an example here that you could have 4 Zoom rooms, so 2 for 1 testers and 2 for 2 testers. But this is totally dependent upon how many students you have in your district or region taking written assessment. This is just an example. But you would put the Zoom link for each one of those rooms here. I would put which subjects are going to be in these rooms and the number of students that should be expected in that room. You're going to send this spreadsheet to your coaches and your officials, so that way the officials can already kind of know how many kids are going to be expected to have to proctor. Then this spot here is for the second written assessment time. You'll notice how the 1 test rooms went away when we got to this section, because this section should only have the 2 test rooms. So again, you could put the Zoom link here, the subjects, and the number of students. If you had a student who's doing 3 tests, you could just add a section for 3 testers. If you're going to have a tech help room, you can put the Zoom link here. This will help the proctors know exactly where to find the Zoom link when they need it. For written assessment officials, again, you're going to put those same 4 officials here at the top, their name, school, email. And then as you are placing the proctors in their rooms, you can put their names, their school, and their email addresses here as well. Again, this will be helpful so that the proctors know who's going to be in their room with them, how many proctors they have with them. Again, the number of proctors is dependent upon how many volunteers you have to help. It also depends on how many rooms that you have. So all of this can be updated to meet what your specific district needs. I then have a 3-team quick recall draw. You'll notice this one just says Zoom link because there's only 1 match happening every round. So you only need 1 Zoom link per round. For the 4-team draw, for the first 2 rounds, you need 2 Zoom links. If you'll notice, the top Zoom link is called Zoom link 1, and it stays the same. So the top of the bracket sticks with Zoom link 1. The bottom of the bracket sticks with Zoom link 2. When you hit round 3, there's only 1 match happening. So then you only need that 1 Zoom link that came from the top here. And then you just finish out with that 1 Zoom. For a 5-team draw, you can go through 3 rounds and have 2 matches going at once. So again, you only need 2 Zoom links. And again, the top match on the bracket is Zoom link 1, and the bottom match of the bracket is Zoom link 2. Once you get to round 4, there's only 1 match happening. Oh, there are 2 matches. There's only 1 match officially happening. There's a chance that a second match could happen to determine placement for points, but typically you're probably only going to have 1 match. So again, Zoom link 1 is the top, Zoom link 2 is the bottom, but these are in dashes because you may not need them. It just depends on how the teams place. And the bracket tells you that. It also tells you up here as a reminder of what the requirements are in order to have matches 7A and 8A. Okay. And then there's also a tab here for the quick recall officials. Again, the same 4 come up here at the top. Here's some other officials. So you need a moderator, judge, and a buzzer operator for each room. Hopefully you have some extra officials that can jump in if one of these officials is having technical difficulties. You'll notice that a change here is cell phone number. You will want these officials to change their cell phone numbers, to exchange their cell phone numbers so that way they can talk with each other if they need be, or if they notice that the moderator in room 2 hasn't quite made it there yet, the judge can reach out to that moderator and see if they're just having technical issues or maybe if they're trying to go to the other room. It just opens that means of communication so that all the officials are on the same page. So this is an example of the spreadsheet. As I said, it's editable for whatever you need. The amount of people per room is really based on your district or region and how many students you're going to have in each room. So it's just very fluid and can change. So as I said, my name is Donovan Kearns. I coach at Royal Spring Middle School in Georgetown, Kentucky. If you have any questions or if there is any way that I can help you get ready to host, you can contact me at my email, donovan.kearns@scott.kyschools.us. But as I said, being organized is the most important and most beneficial thing that you can do to help your competition run smoothly. I wish best of luck for you and for your students, and I know that this Governor's Cup is going to be a great experience. Thank you.